This is East Asia Tonight.
Good Friday evening. I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Today's Ukraine could be tomorrow's East Asia. That warning from Japan's new Prime Minister, Shigeru Ishiba, in his first policy address, highlighting a widening global divide fueled by Middle East and European conflicts. Taiwan slowly reopens after Typhoon Katon battered the island, leaving at least 2 dead and hundreds more injured. North Korea's Kim Jong-un warns of nuclear retaliation if Pyongyang is attacked and also slams the South Korean president as a puppet, remarks made during his inspection of a special military training base. And European Union members green-light tariffs of up to 45% on Chinese-made electric vehicles, paving the way for official implementation and a potential trade war with Asia's largest economy. Also in East Asia tonight, Hong Kong wants to woo Muslim travelers from the Middle East and Southeast Asia, but its shortage of halal dining options is just one of the major stumbling blocks. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has warned that today's Ukraine could become tomorrow's East Asia in his first policy address to Parliament since taking office this week.
我が国は戦後最も厳しく複雑な安全保障環境に直面しています。中国及びロシアによる一連の領空侵犯も発生しました。これは我が国主権の重大な侵害です。
The freshly appointed premier says that the world is becoming increasingly divided and confrontational amid the wars in Europe and the Middle East. Mr. Ishiba has previously proposed an Asian version of NATO to counter rising military threats in the region, particularly from North Korea and China. Well, key ministers in his cabinet say they are not pursuing that idea yet, but Japan's new foreign minister says it could be an idea for the future. Prime Minister Ishiba also flagged Japan's low birth rate and shrinking population, calling it a quiet emergency. The country is grappling with a worsening demographic crisis. Its dwindling workforce is struggling to cope with the mounting cost of healthcare and welfare for the elderly. Well, for more, we have Michio Ishida. She's joining us live from Tokyo. Michio, first up, what are some of the key takeaways from Mr. Ishiba's first policy address?
Well, on the domestic front, he talked at length about rural revitalization. He's known to visit the countryside often. It's become part of his key mission since he was a rural revitalization minister. He said the rural areas support food security for the nation. With their farms, fishery, and forestry industries, they can drive Japan's exports too. He wants to subsidize, by double the subsidies, to rural areas, and he hoped they use that to address their strength. And there are more women than men leaving the countryside or from 33 prefectures. He wants the rural areas to become a choice of their residents. Now he wants to analyze the specific reason for the low birth rate to address the declining population. He thinks each town, village, city in Japan should find the best solution to their depopulation. He wants to create a disaster management agency as Japan is prone to natural disasters. He stressed the need for improvement in evacuation shelters that can immediately provide a toilet, hot food, beds, the basic comfort. He did not mention in his speech, but he has stayed over in mass evacuation shelters and understands the poor living conditions there.
Also, Michio, I'm curious to know how will he handle foreign affairs, which happens to be the strength of his predecessor, Fumio Kishida.
Yes, well, he's basically following the footsteps of Mr. Kishida. He called Japan-U.S. alliance a linchpin of Japan's diplomacy. He wants to expand ties with friendly nations for free and open Indo-Pacific, abiding by the rule of law. It's on the back of a growing tension in the region. And on China, based on the mutual beneficial strategic agreement, he said they will work together, but has expressed concern on its unilateral attempt to change the status quo. And he said he cannot condone the stabbing of a 10-year-old Japanese schoolboy in Shenzhen. He condemned Russia's war in Ukraine, but is also keen to resolve territorial issues to form a peace treaty, although it will be difficult. With North Korea, he criticized its launch of ballistic missiles and placed the resolution of abduction of Japanese as of utmost importance. Now, local media report he aims to open a liaison office in Pyongyang and in Tokyo to resolve the issue. Now, he did not touch on revising the U.S.-Japan status of force agreement and his aspiration of Asian version of NATO he's been mentioning during his presidential campaign speeches.
Now, Mr. Ishiba, he also reiterated the need to win back public trust, and for example, by revitalizing the economy. Do you have more to share with us on that?
Yeah, he wants to grow the economy, and he said consumption is the key as it accounts for more than half of Japan's GDP. He wants elderly citizens who have the will to continue to work and help raise the country's productivity. And he wants to see more investment. And to those who are suffering from price hike, subsidies will be provided. Now, Mr. Ishiba wants to form an extra budget after the election to realize his pledges. That includes support for the reconstruction of Noto Peninsula, struck by the New Year's earthquake, and last month's floods and mudslides. Now, his priority is to end Japan's decades-long deflation. But he will not regain public trust with just his economic pledges, as there's no guarantee the economy will grow. Now, major daily Asahi Shimbun's public opinion poll suggests 75% want further investigation on the political funds scandal, which actually took down Mr. Fumio Kishida from his post. Now, it's to be seen whether Mr. Ishiba will set a criteria to support a candidate for the coming general election.
Thanks so very much for that report, Michio Ishida, speaking to us live from Tokyo. Taiwan is picking up the pieces after Typhoon Katon slammed into the island yesterday, bringing torrential rains and fierce winds. The storm is blamed for the deaths of 2 people, and some 600 more were reportedly injured, and 2 others remain missing. Well, Katon has since been downgraded to a tropical depression. Now, as most parts of Taiwan resumed work this morning, Katon's impact became clear, especially in southern Taiwan, as residents began clearing up the damage. The local governments of Kaohsiung and Pingtung declared their 4th day off for damage repairs and to clear down the trees from roads. Well, the areas were among the worst hit, with power and water still cut this afternoon for an estimated 70,000 homes. Now, Taiwan's high-speed rail has resumed operations, but flight disruptions persist, with 15 international and 88 domestic flights cancelled. The remnants of Katon are still expected to bring more heavy downpours to parts of the island after having dumped some 1.6 meters of rain, causing heavy flooding. Well, landslides also occurred in places such as the northern Keelung city, leaving vehicles and even homes precariously perched on the edge.
让这个深西路跟新丰街这一段有一个大规模的一个崩塌的部分哈，那整个崩塌的长度大概100公尺哈，那我们市府这边已经全力的动员我们的机具跟人力哈来进场来抢修哈，那预估我们这个部分我们会24小时就全力的来抢通它哈。
Staying in Taiwan, a deadly hospital fire that broke out yesterday in Pingtung could be a result of an unstable electrical supply due to the effects of Typhoon Katon. Well, that's according to a top hospital official, citing findings from an initial inspection. Well, the local government is still looking into the cause of the blaze, which started around the same time the storm bore down on the region. The fire broke out at a power distribution room on the 2nd floor, causing smoke to rise to the upper floors. It raged for 3 hours before it was contained. 9 people died, 7 of them from smoke inhalation. 8 of the deceased were patients, and the other a hospital employee. More than 100 patients have been transferred to other hospitals in the region. North Korea has warned that it would use nuclear weapons without hesitation if it's attacked by the South and the United States. Leader Kim Jong-un made those remarks while inspecting a special military training base west of Pyongyang. He called South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol a puppet for threatening to end the North Korean regime on Tuesday, saying that the comment shows which side is destroying regional security and peace. The latest war of words comes weeks after the North released images of a uranium enrichment facility for the first time. At a military parade in Seoul earlier this week, President Yoon warned of a resolute and overwhelming response from Seoul and Washington if Pyongyang attempts to use nuclear weapons. The South has no nuclear weapons of its own, but is covered by the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Meanwhile, the U.S. and South Korea have reached a deal on a 5-year defense cost-sharing plan. Seoul will contribute $1.13 billion towards the cost of stationing U.S. troops in the country in 2026. Now, that's an 8.3% increase from 2025. Relations between the North and South are at one of their lowest points in years, especially after the North announced they are deploying 250 ballistic missile launchers to its southern border. Staying in North Korea, a traditional ceremony was held yesterday to mark the founding of ancient Korea. A video from state-run news agency KCNA shows officials paying their respects at a memorial service for Dangun, who is believed to be the ancestral father of the nation. According to Korean legend, Dangun's father was a god who became a man, and his mother was a bear who wanted to be a woman. South Korea also commemorates the day, with some scholars insisting that Dangjun is not a mythical character, but a historical figure who actually ruled a kingdom in Korea more than 4,000 years ago. On to a story we've been following here in Singapore. Property tycoon Ong Beng Seng has been charged with abetting a public servant in obtaining gifts and obstructing justice. The two charges are in relation to former Transport Minister S. Iswaran, with Ong allegedly providing him various gifts worth around 380,000 Singapore dollars or 290,000 US dollars across several years. Claudia Lim with the story.
Ong Beng Seng came to the state courts in a black Toyota wearing a black face mask at about 2:20 p.m. and was flanked by his lawyers. He gave no comments to the media as he made his way into the state courts. Inside, he was charged with abetting a public servant in obtaining gifts and obstructing justice under Section 165 and Section 204A. Ong is known to be the man who brought Formula One into Singapore in 2008 and owns the rights to the Singapore Grand Prix. Ong Beng Seng was earlier arrested by the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau last year in July amid a graft probe involving former Transport Minister S. Iswaran. Iswaran was sentenced yesterday to 12 months jail after pleading guilty to accepting valuable items from Ong. No plea was taken by Ong, nor did he indicate how he would plead to his charges. His bail has also been extended, and his next hearing date is set for 9 a.m. on 15 November. He left at about 2:40 p.m. and also did not say a word to the media.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, Hong Kong equities rallying again following a one-day dip as traders pin hopes on holiday spending data from the Golden Week break. And a win for the U.S. in the battle for chip supremacy with China. Taiwan's TSMC is teaming up with an American firm to produce advanced chip packaging. Hello again. You're watching East Asia Tonight this Friday evening. It is now time for your business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, it's all about the EU's vote on that extra tariffs on Chinese-made EVs, isn't it?
Right, Oteli. The bloc's executive arm saying it has received the, quote, necessary support from member states for the move. Now, this paves the way for the imposition of tariffs that are as high as 45% on imports of China-made electric vehicles. The EU first announced it would slap high duties on Chinese EV imports in June on the grounds that they benefit heavily from unfair subsidies. The move provoking strong reactions from European and Chinese car makers. Mercedes-Benz calling the move a mistake, while China's Geely Holding said that this could hinder economic and trade relations. Now, for more, we are joined by Ross Collins. He is live with us in Paris. Ross, good to have you on the show. Now, it was a divided EU over the tariff vote, but a simple majority for the tariffs, that was never in doubt, was it?
Well, looking at the rough breakdown, we don't have an exact readout of how each member state voted right now, but there have been some reports coming through from certain EU sources showing that there were more abstentions than the vote in favour and that the vote against. Now, we know that France and Italy said from the outset they were in favour of these duties. We know that Germany positioned itself against the duties, but because there was such a high number of abstentions, it meant that the casting vote went to the European Commission in Brussels, and the Commission was the body that set up the original investigation into whether Chinese electric vehicles were undercutting the European market, and the Commission always positioned itself in favour of imposing extra taxes on these imports, and so it has passed, and it will come into force from November. It was one of the reasons why we did see such a discord between Paris and Berlin, because they were on completely different sides of this argument. Germany fearing a possible trade war, but France's President Macron saying it was unbearable, the level of subsidies that were being put on Chinese electric vehicles by Beijing. But overall, this Friday, this vote has now passed, and those duties will come into effect from next month.
Ross, how do you think these higher tariffs will change the EV landscape for both the EU and China markets, particularly as growth in the global EV sales is actually slowing?
We are starting to see a bit of a slowdown in some of those sales of electric vehicles. China has seen a huge increase in the number of registrations of Chinese brands and China-made electric vehicles here in the European Union over the last 4 years. But those tariffs will now come into effect on some of those brands like BYD, like Geely Holdings, like SAIC, which is facing the highest tariffs of all of the different car makers. So we are likely to see now a retaliation, a response from China, because it has said from the outset it believes that this move is nothing more than, quote, naked protectionism. It says the original investigation by the EU into Chinese electric vehicles here in the bloc was an investigation that seriously violated World Trade Organization rules, and it called that investigation non-compliant, unreasonable and unfair. So we are likely to see that response from Beijing, but it is the move by the EU, and especially French President Macron, supported by the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, that feels the EU needs more of this kind of trade policy going forward to protect itself against those moves from China, and also to respond to the moves that we have seen in the United States under the original Trump administration and then continued by the Biden government.
So China likely to retaliate, but what about the ripple effects we expect beyond the auto sector? Because Brussels is also setting its sights on Chinese solar panels as well as wind turbines.
Yeah, there's lots of different elements that spiral out from this, Roland. And I will mention that in the original statement from the European Union just this Friday, it has said that the EU and China continue to work hard to explore an alternative solution that would have to be fully WTO compatible and adequate in addressing what the EU describes the injurious subsidization established by the investigation. So there is that possibility for Beijing and Brussels to find an alternative solution, but we have already seen this target by Brussels on those solar panels, on wind turbines, renewable energy, and just 2 weeks ago there was another initiation launched at WTO level by the European Union into an investigation by China, an anti-subsidy investigation targeted on exports from the EU of certain dairy products. We also know that there has been a possibility that there could be duties slapped on French cognac makers by Beijing, potential reciprocal tariffs, and that has worried some of the cognac makers here in France, because that is the leading French brands make up 99% of the European Union's cognac exports to China, and so that is certainly something that has worried some of those wine-based liquor makers here. But as I point out, it's just a broad range now, from electric vehicles, wind turbines, solar panels, dairy products, even down to cognac, Roland. So there are many other elements to this, and we will certainly see a response from China, and certainly not the end of the story when it comes to this issue.
Sounds like a trade war in the making. Thank you, Ross. And that was Ross Cullen reporting live from Paris. Shares in Hong Kong rallying again after dipping yesterday on growing optimism that Beijing's stimulus efforts could reboot the world's second largest economy. Traders also looking out for data on China's holiday spending, hoping it would provide more impetus for the markets. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index added 2.8% today. The buying frenzy, which brokers have described as a once-in-a-century event, has pushed the index year-to-date gains exceeding 35%. Mainland stock markets still close for a public holiday until Tuesday. Stocks across East Asia trading mixed as investors continue to keep a watchful eye on the growing conflict in the Middle East. It also follows losses on Wall Street, with investors on edge in the run to a key jobs data report due out later today. In Tokyo, the Nikkei 225 edged 0.2% higher, and it follows a rally yesterday after the country's new prime minister said it was not yet time to raise interest rates. In Seoul, the Kospi did inch higher, led by chip makers. Taiwan weighted index did reopen after two-day closure sparked by Typhoon Katon, but it did end in the red. Quick check on oil. It is looking to be trending higher. Brent crude is currently at $78.40 for a barrel, and that's up 1%. U.S. market, the West Texas Intermediate, $74.31. Now, both contracts rose more than 5% overnight after U.S. President Joe Biden suggested that American officials are considering whether to support an Israeli strike. Now, crude has soared by almost 9% this week alone. Goldman Sachs says oil prices could shoot up $20 per barrel if Iranian production sees a hit resulting from Israeli retaliation. Japan's 7&I Holdings has reportedly reached out to potential buyers for its supermarkets and banking businesses. The owner of the 7-Eleven stores is looking to restructure after rejecting a takeover bid from Canada's Alimentation Couche-Tard. According to a Bloomberg News report, the sale could fetch between $2.2 and $2.9 billion. Now, 7&I is said to have approached private equity funds and other entities about selling businesses under its supermarket empire. And these include its original retail operation, Itoya Kado. It's part of a push to sharpen the firm's focus on its convenience store business. 7&I is under mounting pressure to show that it can command higher valuation after rejecting an initial approach from Couche-Tard as being too low. Before Couche-Tard's interest was made public, 7&I had said in April it was considering listing Itoyo Kado. JP Morgan said in an August report the supermarket's business is worth around $1.6 billion. It also reportedly up for sale is 7&I's stake in Seven Bank. Now, 7&I controls roughly 46% of the bank in a stake worth around $1.05 billion. Now, while the financial business that includes the lender makes up around 7% of 7&I's operating profit, it brings in more cash than the superstore units. Now, Taiwan's TSMC and Arizona headquartered Amkor have reached a deal to cooperate on advanced chip packaging in the U.S. It marks a win for America as it pushes to stay ahead of China in creating components needed for applications like artificial intelligence. It'll be the first time to shift such production to the U.S. from Taiwan, where all production is currently concentrated. TSMC and Amkor's joint statement says that the deal will expand the U.S. semiconductor ecosystem and accelerate product cycle times. TSMC's key clients at its Arizona plant are NVIDIA, AMD, and Apple. Test production started in mid-2024 and mass production is due to begin in 2025. The Taiwanese chip giant has further pledged to increase its investment in the U.S. to $65 billion. Amkor, in turn, says it'll invest in a $2 billion chip packaging testing facility in Peoria, Arizona. Advanced chip packaging has emerged as a crucial battleground for leading global chip makers. The generative AI boom has further fueled demand for advanced packaging. The U.S. has allocated an additional $1.6 billion in public funds to support the development of advanced chip packaging capabilities within the U.S. The end of a 3-day strike in U.S. ports, taking the fizz out of shipping stocks across Asia. The sooner-than-expected stoppage of the labor action leading investors to reverse expectations of a surge in freight prices. Evergreen Marine, Wanhai Lines, and Yangming Marine in Taiwan all fell nearly 10%, the heaviest declines for several months. In South Korea, HMM slipped as much as 6.6% before paring off some of those losses to end 5% in the red, and Pan Ocean dropping 5.4%. Japanese shippers logging declines of more than 9% and were the largest drag on the Topix index. Analysts say shipping stocks had previously rallied on expectations of price increases triggered by the U.S. dock workers' strike. Investors who had hoped for a short-term rebound in freight charges, which are in a downward trend, are selling as the strike has ended. And that is the latest in Business Otele.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Hong Kong is a renowned food paradise, but not for Muslim travelers. Less than 1% of its 18,000 dining spots are halal certified. Well, we find out what the government is doing to entice more travelers from the Middle East. Today's Ukraine could be tomorrow's East Asia. That warning from Japan's new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba in his first policy address, highlighting a widening global divide fueled by Middle East and European conflicts. Taiwan slowly reopens after Typhoon Katon battered the island, leaving at least 2 dead and hundreds more injured. North Korea's Kim Jong-un warns of nuclear retaliation if Pyongyang is attacked, and also slams the South Korean president as a puppet, remarks made during his inspection of a special military training base. Hong Kong is tapping into the Muslim market to diversify its stagnant economy. It's looking at providing more halal dining options to draw more travelers from the Middle East and Southeast Asia. Well, with the policy address less than 2 weeks away, the community is urging the government to provide funding to help them expedite the shift. CNA's Jojo Chan with this report.
Hong Kong has long been hailed as a food paradise in Asia. But for Muslims, halal options are limited. Most of those that are certified offer Indian or Middle Eastern cuisine. Only a handful serve Cantonese dishes. The Incorporated Trustees of the Islamic Community Fund is the only authorized body in the city that grants food outlets halal certificate.
Assalamu alaikum. Today we have inspection.
Yes, please.
Yes.
You can check.
I think your certificate is expiring.
Yeah, it's already expired.
Yes, so we need to have inspection so that we can issue the certificate for next year.
Sure.
Any other services at this counter? You have any liquor or wine or non-halal items?
We don't sell any alcohol
Okay.
here.
So only halal?
Only halal.
Okay, good.
To be halal accredited, food must be prepared separately from prohibited items like pork under Islamic rules.
There's some like a small takeaway, but not a big restaurant like this. We have many customers, those who do the birthday parties, wedding parties, so like 100 people, 120, especially those who are looking for halal food.
At least we want to have more than 10% of total restaurant. They should be halal certified because Hong Kong is an attractive place for all over the world, and Hong Kong is surrounded many Muslim countries like Indonesia, Malaysia and Singapore.
They've a long way to go. Today, less than 1% of the 18,000 dining spots in Hong Kong are halal certified.
Yeah, we don't use any sausage, but the lamb and chicken we can easily find.
This is the halal sign. It is imported from Australia.
Making the shift isn't easy, as restaurants like Tribes face limited produce choices. They often resort to importing the bulk of their halal meats from countries like China and Brazil, which can be pricey. About 1/5 of their customers are tourists. That number has gone up in recent months.
The Muslim from anywhere, when he or she is coming, the first thing that he or she will look halal restaurant or halal food. And now we are receiving many more applications, and especially a few months before the government has taken the initiative to invite the people from Middle East and from other Muslim countries. Now many small restaurants and international cuisine and also 5-star, 4-star hotels, they are also approaching us for halal certification.
Since 2023, government officials have made multiple visits across Southeast Asia and the Middle East. It's part of the mainland's broader push to shore up diversified investment links amid strained ties with the US and Europe.
中東市場係另外一個具潛力嘅客源市場，旅發局咧係會繼續喺多方面嘅宣傳工作，例如舉行簡報會咧，向當地嘅業界咧介紹香港嶄新嘅旅遊產品，宣傳訪港旅遊優惠，以及同旅遊品牌合作推出旅遊套票，吸引中東旅客到訪。
Hong Kong is home to 300,000 Muslims, accounting for 4% of its population. Building a Muslim-friendly destination goes beyond food. The city must also factor in infrastructure.
We do see potentials, being a niche market which is untapped in Hong Kong. But currently, what we are seeing right now is the business travelers, not so much on the leisure travelers. We can set up ad hoc prayer rooms for them and to cater to their dietaries, special dietaries, provided they inform us in advance. So, for instance, during fasting month, they can also let us know that they are currently fasting, so they can pre-order the food in advance for their sahur, which is the breakfast. Yeah. Then we have prayer essentials, including the prayer map and also the Al-Quran. Also will be set up in a room in advance.
The hotel is just next to Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Centre, which plays host to various events throughout the year. Grand Hyatt has seen its Muslim clientele grow 20% since Hong Kong reopened its borders.
Another measure that we can put in place is investment in educations, bringing in the experts to at least facilitate the conversations. It can be cultural sensitivities.
One common lament by Muslim visitors is the city's lack of worship spaces at key locations.
I propose to the government to have the worship places at the airport and some sign, Arabic sign, the Muslim can understand. We feel that if the halal restaurant are increased and the Muslim facilities like the mosque or educational institution are increased, so it will be a good service for the Muslims and good attraction for others to move to Hong Kong.
Until then, the efforts to truly welcome the Muslim market continue.
Well, meantime, China is raising the retirement age for both men and women next year to boost a shrinking workforce and support the aging population. For many in Hong Kong, retiring at home is getting harder. Well, CNA's Money Mind spoke to a Hong Kong resident who's looking to the mainland to stretch her dollar.
Mandy Lam is worried she won't be able to afford to retire in the city she calls home, Hong Kong.
基本上你即係行出門口已經係喺度燒錢㗎啦。
Mandy works as a beautician, earning an average of about 20,000 to 30,000 Hong Kong dollars a month. That's between 2,500 and 3,800 US dollars. But she says inflation is biting.
啲水電煤一路加，車費咧好多樣嘢，其實咧好多細微嘅你哋睇唔到嘅。有時可能我嗰日已經即係買下啲濕濕星星嘢，咁使千幾蚊㗎啦。啲麵包又貴咧，我當我65歲退休，咁其實如果喺香港，你又要有醫療啊好多嘢。
But Mandy has not been able to save that amount, especially after the pandemic hit her earnings hard. She's already close to 60. Her solution is to look to mainland China, just an hour away by train.
即係我香港唔夠啫嘛，我大陸夠咪得咯？我呢度揸100萬可能冇用，但喺大陸揸100萬就唔同啦。
Mandy's mother lived in a nursing home in Hong Kong in her older age. But it's not an experience Mandy wants for herself.
香港嘅老人院咧，就算你點樣經經濟濟咧，即係你預2萬蚊到咯，咁啊，梗係大陸啦。香港真係拍馬都追唔到。香港嗰啲咧叫獨立房間咧，佢唔係叫房，我只係講叫partition啫。
The number of people from Hong Kong aged 65 and above living in China's Greater Bay Area increased by 11% over 5 years. The main reason is the cheaper cost of living on the mainland. A major shortage in retirement home spaces in Hong Kong is another push factor.
So right now, 1 out of 5 of our 7 million people is aged more than 65. And also, according to United Nations, actually Hong Kong will be the oldest population in the world by 2050. Nowadays, because of the nursing home shortage in Hong Kong, so we have around 17,000 number of people on the waiting list for the nursing home in Hong Kong. And so it takes around 12 to 16 months for them to wait for a space.
Hong Konger Miss Young made the move to the mainland several years ago. She's never looked back.
梗係比得好啦，香港嘅的咁多地方，唉，一間房逼逼實實。
The 94-year-old lives in this retirement home in the city of Foshan, which caters to retirees from Hong Kong. That includes staff who speak Cantonese instead of Mandarin, as well as meals catered to the Hong Kong palate.
好，啲飯啊啲嘢煮得幾好食，餐餐都有豬肉啊，唔係豬肉啊魚啊，乜嘢燒肉啊，咁你又餐餐都有，冇話冇肉㗎啦。
Elderly residents can also apply for an allowance of 4,000 Hong Kong dollars or $500 a month as pocket money.
如果喺4000零蚊喺香港，可能都即係唔係咁襟使。但喺內地嘅話，呢4000幾蚊對老人家嗰個生活方面咧，就足夠去即係俾佢哋用喺其他方面嘅消費啦。
Mandy agrees that when it comes to cost, there is no contest. But she does have concerns about the quality of medical care on the mainland should she need to be hospitalized.
香港3條狗，講真，衰極咧15分鐘就到㗎啦。咁咧大陸咧我就真係唔知。
Ultimately, it's not just about finances.
其實我覺得退休生活係最主要，我係真係想過得慢啲嘅。但係香港係冇得慢啊！你連行步路喺條街。你行得慢，後邊都錫你嘅。但喺大陸咧就唔同啦。大陸我可能可以租車啊，因為佢嗰啲經濟效益好啊嘛。咁我叫個司機其實好多㗎，我包個司機一日可能係幾嚿水㗎咋。咁如果我行得走得，咁我講真，我上去咁樣生活，我覺得係個人咧會開心咗，應該條命都長啲啩。
You can catch the full Money Mind episode on our website and on YouTube. Now, coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Facebook owner Meta says it's doing its best to ensure its platforms are guarded against bad actors as scrutiny on big tech intensifies ahead of the US elections. Now, turning our focus away from East Asia, it's about a month to the US election and big tech is under scrutiny over how it will fend off bad actors on its platforms. Already, US officials have expressed concern about disruptions from disinformation on Facebook. Well, Nick Clegg, Meta's president of global affairs, told CNA's Elizabeth Neo that the platform is doing as much as it can to ensure political discussions can be conducted safely and openly.
A report by this online advocacy group said that Facebook acted too late to tackle misinformation in the 2020 US election. And then it was also criticized for allowing Russian operatives to meddle in the 2016 election. Given that we are just 1 month away from the US election, I'd like to know, what measures Meta, Facebook has put in place to, guard against these bad actors in this election, especially with AI in the mix now.
I don't think there's any industry, and I sort of challenge anyone to identify anyone in the industry who's doing as much as Meta is to try and ensure that when people want to discuss politics, or when there is campaign content circulating on Facebook or Instagram or apps and services. I think there's any company that does as much as we do to try and make sure that that happens safely and openly. We're the only company to employ by far the world's largest network of independent fact checkers. Over 100 of them, working in over 60 languages, round the clock, identifying misinformation. And we have spent around $20 billion, $5 billion just in this last year alone on safety and integrity in the way that our services are constructed. We have about 40,000 people working on that, more actually than were working on that at the time of the 2020 elections. We have tried to make sure that politics and political content doesn't sort of overwhelm people's experience, because most people don't come to Facebook and Instagram to sort of argue about politics. I mean, many people use X, or what was used to be called Twitter, to sort of argue about the news.
I think it was announced as well this year that it is deprioritizing some political content on its platforms. Do you think that by taking such a passive role, it allows for more bad actors to infiltrate the space? And with big tech's growing influence and power, and I'd like to appeal to your background as well as a former politician, it has some responsibility in ensuring this safe space on the platform, especially in this fight against misinformation, especially after we saw in 2021 that insurrection, which also had to do with bad actors infiltrating platforms like X, Meta.
We're not being passive about politics. We're simply not artificially boosting or recommending political content to people if they haven't actually asked for it. It seems quite reasonable that if you're on Instagram or Facebook, you shouldn't have us as a company sort of saying, hey, look at this political content, look at that political content. We're just not inserting ourselves and, in a sense, sort of pushing political content when it's not sought out by people.
U.S. officials have been attempting to crack down on attempts to spread disinformation during the election, especially in what's expected to be another razor-thin contest.
Something you said at a Senate hearing recently is that Meta's vigilance needs to be constant, not just during the election period. And how do you expect this to be done? Because I know earlier, you talked about the manpower being deployed, independent fact checkers and all that. But in Meta's cost-cutting measures, which started some 2022, I think there were layoffs across its trust and safety department, as well as its customer service teams. And last year, it also dissolved a fact-checking tool. So how do you expect to provide this constant vigilance when the resources to do so appear to be diminished?
So they're not, is the answer. We actually have more people working on safety and integrity now than we did in the 2020
Have they been
US election.
rehired to fill these roles?
No, it is possible for a large organisation to trim costs in one area and actually expand in others, or remain constant and vigilant in others, and that's exactly what we've done. The most relevant thing is, how are we using technology at scale to deal with violating content? And that is what we are very heavily investing in. And it's an important thing to remember this. People talk often about the threats of AI, but AI is also a sword, not just a shield, in terms of how we use it to actually identify violating content, to go after it.
Meta's president of global affairs, Nick Clegg, was speaking on the sidelines of the launch of Meta's AI accelerator program for Asia-Pacific startups, with Singapore's Minister of Digital Development and Information, Josephine Teo, also in attendance. Now, the program will allow companies and developers to integrate Meta's open-source AI model, Llama, into their products, with the aim of developing solutions to shape innovation. Now, the Silk Road conjures exotic images of traders on camels across vast deserts. While all that was likely true for over 1,500 years in history, the Silk Road wasn't actually a single road or route, but a network of them that didn't just move goods, but so much more. Well, a new exhibition in London is trying to explain just that.
The British Museum would like you to think of this ancient pathway as a series of overlapping trade arteries that connected Eastern Asia with Africa and Northwestern Europe. And they have the goods to prove this in their deliberately pluralized major exhibition called Silk Roads. With a collection of objects from 500 to 1000 AD spanning the vast distance between Korea and Sweden.
One of the most spectacular loans that we have on display in the exhibition is this fantastic wall painting, which is on loan to the UK for the very first time from our partners in Uzbekistan. And this is a wall painting that is associated with a group known as the Sogdians, who were great traders along the Silk Roads at this time, moving very vast distances. We have traces of them, for example, from China into India and the Middle East. And this wall painting shows a procession which includes the camels, which you might expect to see in a Silk Road show, but also elephants and people from across different parts of the world who are all processing to an ancestral tomb in the Sogdians' heartland of Sogdiana, and the capital at Samarkand is where this spectacular object came from.
All this interconnectedness reminding us that globalization happened way before the internet. This tiny bronze statue from the medieval period welcomes visitors. It's the Viking Buddha. You heard right, found on the Swedish island of Helgo, west of Stockholm, and likely produced in the Swat Valley, that's now Pakistan. That's some 5,000 kilometers apart. And no one straight road could have moved this artifact over 2,500 years ago. Apart from the myriad of complex routes, this exhibition highlights the role a young woman played in globalizing silk.
So the story goes, according to the historical records, that there was this princess from an eastern kingdom who hid silkworm eggs and also mulberry tree seeds in her headdress in order to smuggle that out of her homeland to the kingdom of Khotan when she was about to marry the king of Khotan, because the kingdom of Khotan didn't have the technology of how to farm silkworms and to create real silk from cocoons. So she wanted to bring that to her new home. And it's a really important story, I think, because obviously with the Silk Road, silk is a key material, and also it reminds us that women could also play a part in the story of the Silk Roads too. For example, elite women who were part of marriage alliances also traveled long distances and helped to have some role to play in the transmission of knowledge and technology. And also probably she was followed by attendants, female attendants, who probably helped her with that transmission as well. So it's a really great story that we wanted to include in the exhibition.
Another aspect this exhibition drives home is how the Silk Roads forced major religions to meet and bond over trade and technology transfer. Lessons for today's increasingly fragmented world.
And on that note, we wrap up Friday's edition of East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.